Welcome to today's Zoom session for Mr. Fowler's class, English 103, 1L01. I, of course, am Mr. Fowler, and I'm happy to see you all here today for this Zoom session, number 14. We have a lot of items on our agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and get right into it with you. Using the share screen option, I'm going to go ahead and highlight our work for today. Couple of concerns here as we get started. So for today's session number 14, let's go ahead and look at the rundown. Hopefully by this time you've had enough of an opportunity to review the analysis peer review essay. It is attached, or rather let me go back to the course homepage. It is attached to session 13, which was Tuesday's session. You can see it right here. So you had a chance to look at that. Let's go ahead and open it up just for the sake of making sure that we check all of our boxes and cross all of our T's, dot all of our I's, those good things. There it is. All right, so you can see here that you just have the basic lines: reviewer, title of the essay, name of the writer whose paper you're reviewing. We're looking for an effective hook, trying to identify the operating criteria, identify the paper's thesis statement, and then you want to paraphrase it using your own words and sentence structure. And then finally, does your peer review partner use effective in-text citations and works cited page citations in the appropriate style? Okay, so once we have established that, it's time for you to complete the peer review analysis yourselves. And as I was showing you here, for the peer review analysis, here it is, only 3 out of 14. I know a couple of students were able to contact me to ask for a peer review, and I tried to address as many of those concerns as I could. The other place I wanted to point out, of course, is under the content link. You have an opportunity to find in the analysis essay section an entire module called peer review. Now under peer review, right here, you have the peer review document that we just looked at, but then you also have anonymously titled essays, as many as I got, that were turned in a rough approximation of being on time. So you have all of these to choose from. Obviously, some of these, or one of these, may be yours if you're watching the video. But if you're not, if you have not yet turned one in, do so soon. Because up to this week, I think a late draft, even though it may not result in the grade that you wanted ideally, would give you an opportunity to still complete the draft in a meaningful way. Because next week, we're moving on to bigger and better things, a whole other assignment, the final major essay for this semester. Okay. All right, so now we're on to our video lecture for today. Virtual goods and services, money for nothing, and you'll see why I ask that or pose that as a question. Now, after we have completed our Zoom video lecture, if you still have yet to respond to this week's threaded discussion post, take some time to do that. I think if you just gave yourself between 20 to 25 minutes to think about the questions, formulate a response, and maybe take a few seconds to comment on 2 other students' posts, then your work for the week would be essentially completed, and you would have that material well in hand for the week, and you'd be on to bigger and better things. So please take a few minutes of your time today to do that very thing. Then, of course, for next time, if you have not yet read this section, I know there are a few students who did read these chapters, or maybe who have finished even the entire book. For those of you who did, bravo. But for those of you who are reading with the pacing for the class, the next group of chapters would be 17 to 21. So please read chapters 17 to 21, or as much as you can in the novel up to that point. Okay. So that's a basic preview / review of what it is we're going to take a look at today. All right, before we go on, I'm going to say good morning to Madison. How are you?
Fine.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I would like to pause for a few minutes. Do you have any questions or concerns before we get into today's discussion?
No.
Okay. Then I'm just going to jump right into it. So we had another reading for today, Greengard's piece on virtual goods and social games. Or sorry, I interposed those two. Social games and virtual goods. So I'm going to share that real quickly. And as you can see, this is a relatively short article, but one that I thought was well written. And it comes to us from this piece called Society. One I was not very familiar with, but students actually found this by using the Kishwaukee College database when researching whether or not virtual goods and services constitute a viable business enterprise. So when we're thinking ahead to next week and introducing our final essay project, The Argument, I've tried to create a range of topics that don't necessarily deal implicitly with the novel, but certainly have ties to the novel that we have read. And I tried to align them so that most of our fields of study here at Kishwaukee College are reflected in the various prompts that are available for this final essay. So one of those fields of endeavor is business or business marketing. So this is not necessarily restricted to people who are students who feel they might be majoring or focusing in business, but it is a business related topic that I think you could use to approach such an argument. So social games, virtual goods, the popularity of virtual goods and currencies in online gaming is changing how people think and act about money. And again, it's by author Samuel Greengard. So there are a whole range of topics that we've been reading about during the semester. Greengard we're going to read about and discuss today. And I'm going to bring Greengard back for another context next week. So this one will be good for coverage for this week and next week. So if you've already read it, you probably won't have any extra reading outside of the source novel. Then we'll have one more focusing on education called Ready Learner 1 by Osfath. And once we've completed that discussion, it will relatively be up to you as students to complete the argument project. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Madison, before I continue on, do you have any questions about the argumentative essay? I have a whole class session where I'm going to introduce it next week, but I wanted to ask right now if you had any questions before I proceeded.
No,
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't think so.
All right. Like I said, I'll cover it in detail next week as well. So this week is primarily our revision week, where students are focusing on the revising of their second essay project. How's that process going for you, Madison?
Good. When exactly is that due? Is that due Friday or Tuesday?
I think I gave you until Tuesday this time because it was a busy week. I'll have to double check, but I am pretty sure I gave you until Tuesday. If not, that's something we can work out.
So it's due next Tuesday.
Yeah, I believe so, because we came off of the 4th of July weekend, and so a little extra, a full week might be nice for the purposes of preparation. All right.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and get into Greengard again. I know I'm shifting back and forth between share screens and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and take a look at this piece. There it is. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Let me see. Try this again. Share screen. That's the one. So for this article, Greengard does a nice job of sort of dropping us into the scenario. And I just want to spend a little bit of time focusing on his introductory paragraph because he has a relatively smooth transition into this discussion. He says, he writes rather, click into the world of social online gaming. And these days, you're almost certain to encounter more than avatars, demons, and battlefields. As growing throngs of players dive into these environments and games as diverse as Farmville, Mafia Wars, the World of Warcraft, and Second Life, they're often buying and selling virtual goods using virtual currencies. It's a multi-billion-dollar trend. According to market research firm Instat, the demand for virtual goods hit 7.3 billion in 2010, up from 2.1 in 2007. Moreover, Instat predicts the figure will reach 14 billion by 2014. Another consulting firm, Magid and Associates, reports that the percentage of web users trading virtual goods will grow from about 13% to 21% throughout 2011. So he does a nice job stating the background and building some context for readers. He hasn't yet even introduced an argument, but you already get the sense of where he's moving as a writer by virtue of how he sets up his introduction. So, Madison, quick question for you here. Did you find any of this material surprising? I'm going to stop my video, but I'll still be available. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. And I'll bring the video back, but go ahead and answer that first question.
No, none of it's surprising.
Do you find that's because...
I mean...
Go ahead.
I have yet to play a game on my phone that does not charge in-app purchases unless you had to pay to get the app and had everything unlocked.
Yeah.
And the new trend, from what I've found, is subscriptions. So you're no longer paying $1.99 for permanent access to something. You have to pay $5.99 monthly. for something.
Yeah. That's a good thing, a good element to point out about this new kind of, I guess you'd say, online trading through gaming. That the subscription service has replaced this maybe a early version of a digital marketplace, and I think early is a fair term to use here because most of this article is kind of dated. I mean, they talk about 2011 as a hinge point. That's what, 10 years ago now? Nine, sorry. Math is not my long suit. 9 years ago. So this article is even a little bit behind the times, but still, I find the relative acceptance of these ideas to be somewhat jarring for people who aren't familiar with the industry. I remember an occasion where a student had written a paper about this same topic and had taken it to this was just last semester, had taken it to the writing lab to get some prep work done. And the writing lab assistant, was kind of beside themselves. And they said, "You mean people actually pay for this sort of thing, like real money for some of these services?" And the student was, adamantly said, "Yeah, absolutely. It's as the article suggests, $1 billion a year industry." So I think subscription services, as you suggest, Madison, I hopefully I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it seems subscription services seem like the next step in the evolution of getting gaming off of the launch platform and into some real economic, what do I want to say, the economic stratosphere, right? We've gone, this isn't just a minor concern anymore. Go ahead.
So, I would say it's the opposite because subscription services have been around for years. Like with Xbox Live and things like that, where you've had to pay for years before before like these microtransactions.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. Can I have you pause for a second, just so we can talk about that term in case somebody might be watching the video before they read the article. If they go back to the article, then they can literally, what are microtransactions, as far as you understand them?
Okay, so microtransactions are like things like in-app purchases. If somebody is playing Fortnite, a microtransaction might be to buy a loot box, or other games where you might have like shard pulls or whatever from like a game on your phone, where you're paying maybe 99 cents and you're getting something. And it's from like 99 cents up to however much they want to put down. But generally, they're really small amounts, like the 99 cents, and they add up.
Right.
So if you buy multiples of them, you're getting charged, for example, $1. And if you buy 100 of them, there's suddenly $100.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like something big purchase like you might buy a video game. You're buying something small in a video game, like a skin,
right,
or maybe a map. For example, if you're playing a game where it's like a shooter game, you might buy a new map. Things like that. Those are microtransactions. Things you can't unlock without paying money.
Right. I think that's a really good way to describe the role of microtransactions within the context of individual games. There's a quote here that I brought up on the screen. Designers are consciously introducing objects to see how they can influence behavior. That's that's not necessarily in reference to microtransactions themselves, yet that kind of explains what a microtransaction does. It's an in-game enhancement that is on the surface designed to enhance or improve playability for a particular game. However, there is another side to that equation, which is that if you're playing a game in a competitive sense, to be a member of a community related to that game, sometimes these in-app purchases or microtransactions can give players an incremental advantage. Not a vast advantage. It's nothing that's going to completely outclass the other people who are playing the game. But then at some point you have to ask, is the way in which these microtransactions are used ultimately fair to the community of players that support a particular game? Do you have an opinion or a feeling about that either way, Madison?
Okay, so if you're playing a game that's free, for example, a game on your phone, something like Farmville, you're playing a game that's free. As long as there is a physical way to get items that are actually useful other than aesthetic changes. So for example, if you go up to the top, as long as you're able to get farm cash, like if you look at the picture,
Yep.
as long as you're able to get farm cash inside of the game, whether or not it's a large amount of it or it's you maybe get so many per level and so you have to save it wisely
Okay.
and then choose how you spend it, I think it's okay. So if you're not going to, maybe you have to work harder at it than somebody who says, oh, I'm going to drop $100 for, I think it says 650 farm cash
Yeah,
or whatever,
I believe that's right. Yeah, go ahead.
that okay, that person may have more and they may be using it more frequently, but you still have, if you're playing through the game, you still have the option to get everything in the game.
Right.
You might not have you may have to wait and save up, and you might have to be 20 levels behind this person or 20 levels ahead of this person before you can finally buy something. But it is accessible to everyone. I don't think it's wrong.
Okay, so I think that's that's really well put. When the same access to goods and services is available, but the only advantage that you would get is time oriented, then you seem to suggest that, at least from your perspective, it's fair. It's still relatively fair. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, because if somebody actually, okay, so I'm of the mindset that if you are a true gamer, essentially you're not going to cheat, which is essentially what dropping $100 is. It's cheating.
Right. So,
And in some groups, yeah, okay, cheating is fine. But in other groups, for like serious players, perhaps cheating is deemed as wrong. Okay, so if you're dropping the cash on things, essentially you're just cheating.
okay.
Because you're getting things early.
All right. So then maybe there is would you say there's a division between perhaps a more altruistic or pure gamer as opposed to somebody who's just using the cash advantage because they are more of a casual gamer? Is that
correct?
Okay. And again, I think that's a relative.
And I think that I should point out, I think that's very relative to what game you're playing.
Sure.
So, for example, Assassin's Creed has that where you can buy points and skill points and things that you can like dump into skills. So you could be fully maxed out at like level 1 if you bought all the skills points you needed. The difference is, in that situation, for somebody, you'd probably be seen as cheating because, well, you could be seen as cheating because you're buying items that you don't need to buy. You can get those in-game. And it's not a leisure game like Farmville. Farmville seems to be a very leisurely game.
Okay.
Compared to others. I think it's dependent on the game. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. Leisure games, and by their title alone, imply that time is of consequence, and sometimes players have more time and less time to dedicate to the game in question. So I think those are all relatively good points, and they're well stated. And I want to move back to the article for just a bit. I've highlighted a section here that I think is interesting from a writing perspective. So we've got 1, 2, 3 sort of developmental paragraphs. Now, in a traditional collegiate style essay versus a piece of journalistic writing, which is what we have here, we would probably have already stated the paragraph in the first paragraph. Stated the thesis rather in the first paragraph. But here, Greengard does something a little bit different. He starts with this quotation in his fourth paragraph, and he says, "It's clear that people are willing to pay real money for all sorts of virtual goods," explains Vili Lendravitra, researcher at the Helsinki Institute for Information Technology and visiting scholar at the University of Tokyo. As in the physical world, objects take on meaning based on perceived status, scarceness, and emotional value. In today's gaming universe, coveted items include things like homes, weapons, space stations, and yes, even horse manure, as it relates to Farmville here. Yet behind the facade of glitzy interfaces and alluring virtual objects lies a medium that's driving changes in the way governments, researchers, legal experts, and the public think about goods, and in the way people behave. I would argue that that one sentence in the fifth paragraph, and it's a lengthy one, but I would argue that this is probably the closest thing that we have to a formal academic thesis for this article. So it's just another moment that I wanted to pause on and emphasize, because where and when you place your thesis is relatively up to you. Now, I again recommend a traditional placement for a thesis, because after you complete this course, you'll have to go on to a 104. And the fact of the matter is, most of the time, your instructors will probably expect a thesis in your first paragraph. But I still like to suggest early on in the collegiate writing phase that the best kind of writing isn't necessarily set in stone and is more flexible, perhaps, than I think a lot of early writing and perhaps even a lot of later writing classes might suggest. So just take that for what it's worth. Just to finish up that paragraph, he continues by writing that although virtual goods and currencies aren't going to overtake their physical counterparts, they are making a mark on society and affecting everything from culture to business to government. So I want to pause there for a minute. Let's see here. I want to get my camera back. So, Madison, let's transition from that article to the text. What do you see as similar from this, the ideas presented in the first part of Greengard's article to our text? How do you see the virtual goods and services of Ready Player One, even though they're fictional? Okay, we'll grant that this is a fictional reality. But how do you see the parallels between what happens in real gaming sort of playing against what happens in this very fictive version of a video gaming experience?
I mean, he orders pizza and pizza comes, but that's not really like.
Okay, fair enough.
That's like that's the same thing we do. You like literally you put in an order and a pizza comes.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't come by drone yet, but who knows?
We're getting there. He like purchased an AI.
Okay, yes, max headroom. And I think I mentioned this last time. If you're not aware of who Max Headroom is, I'll post a little video link so that you can explore that if you're interested in such a topic. But yes, go ahead. He purchases an AI on his spaceship to help him get physically active, kind of help train him. Go on, what else?
Didn't he like get it like a prostitute?
Yeah, well, not quite. It's a little
I
bit.
think I'm ahead, but I think that was something like a prostitute. It's not a real person.
Right, that's the distinction I was going to make.
Essentially yeah.
Yeah, it's not one of the more savory elements of the story, but it's in there. He at one point becomes very lonely.
193.
Yeah, and very dejected by virtue of the fact that Artemis is kind of no longer in his life. She's not only stopped or cut off the promise for romantic advancement, but she has also stopped collaborating with him in terms of the contest. So in his dejection, one of the things he does purchase is a realistic partner or AI.
ACHD.
Mm-hmm. And that is one of the real world goods, one of the virtual goods that he owns within the sphere of the Oasis. But like you were saying, his AI and the spaceship itself, I can't remember, is it the spaceship from Firefly?
Hold on.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I don't think it's. I don't think it's the Serenity.
Okay.
I'm a terrible nerd.
Well, I'm double checking my text as well. I think it's chapter 19 is where we find out about. That's where he breaks up with Artemis. Okay.
The Flying DeLorean.
Yeah, yes, that's another in-app purchase he makes. He does buy a version of, and that features prominently in the film adaptation as well. He does buy a virtual version of the DeLorean.
Trying.
It's called the Falco after the flying dog. You're right. It's not the ship from. It's on page 200.
I was gonna say I did not see the name Serenity.
Yeah. I think maybe I was confusing the novel and the film again, because the Serenity does make a brief appearance in the film, amongst other things, but it's the Falco is the name of his ship, which is named after the flying dog from the Never-Ending Story. But to get back to this idea, in the world of the Oasis, when so much importance is placed on this virtual space because it's the only space that's inhabitable in a world that has kind of gone to pot. All of these little bells and whistles that are virtual, they're ephemera, right? They don't exist in any physical sense, most of them, but yet people buy these items to advance in their quests to find the egg or to fulfill a need in the Oasis. And that is a source of revenue that simply did not exist before, as Greengard points out, around the early 90s. That's why I titled this lecture with a question: is it really money for nothing? Because what is the cost offset to develop these virtual goods as opposed to the recomposed? Try it again. What is the offset, the cost of building these items as opposed to the price that they're listed for online? Do you have any sense of this, Madison? I mean, coders have to create the items in the video game sphere, the virtual sphere, and there's probably a certain amount of work that goes into that. But in terms of the actual time spent coding and creating the item versus the payoff that you would get from multiple people purchasing that item, do you think that trade-off is fair, or do you think that the video game manufacturers and engineers are coming out ahead in that process?
Oh, they're totally coming out ahead.
Okay, good.
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, yeah, it takes time and effort to make items, but for a majority of games, specifically with microtransactions, unless it's a skin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even if it's a skin, it's a matter of rearranging things. For example, a skin. You literally have a skin already programmed.
Mm-hmm. And
It's just a matter.
go ahead.
Huh?
I was
It's
just going to
just a
say.
matter of.
I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
say real quickly, if you're not familiar with this terminology by now, you probably should be if you're reading along in the book, because a skin is just the visual appearance of an avatar in a virtual space. Wade even talks about the fact that he has got a basic virtual skin when he attends school. That's all I wanted to clarify. Go ahead, Madison.
Right. So for example, with a skin, you have, for example, you already have the coding to make it work because that's part of the base game.
Mm-hmm.
Something you already would have implemented at the beginning. All you have to do is slightly modify it based on color, location of that color.
Mm-hmm.
And that literally makes itself a new skin. Especially in games where, the avatars don't necessarily move.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have a game where the avatar is stationary and you're just dressing them up.
Right.
You don't have to worry about then anything moving, any shifting of, dead spots where there's not color. Those are things you have to go back in and fix. Glitches out.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, if you already have content for a full game out,
Mm-hmm.
you are obviously have an idea of how the game works.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that you can implement relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a big game and you have hundreds of customers that are buying, for example, in Smash, they have a sand skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a huge Undertale fan, which a lot of people are,
Sure.
how many people went out of their way to purchase that skin? That fighter, Mii fighter skin.
So
And when you buy that, you buy a season pass, so you're getting a bunch of other characters with it. They're making their money.
Sure. Those are great examples. Another example that I know is marketed specifically to players upon the release of this particular game series has got to be the Mortal Kombat series. They recently have ramped up the selling of their skins. They've used some video game characters like Spawn and some 80s horror movie icon characters like Jason from Friday the 13th and Leatherface and Alien and the Predator and a couple of other characters. Dead by Daylight has done the same sort of thing. But Mortal Kombat specifically, I've seen RoboCop, I think, is the one that jumps, and Terminator are the two that jump to mind. They have been marketed aggressively in the advertisements for these games. So the skins themselves, just the ability to play as RoboCop or Terminator, in addition to the original characters from the franchise, that's a selling point in and of itself. And some of those characters are featured as downloadable skins or content, micro transactions, if you will, within the context of the game, just to sell the game itself. And like you said, the same thing applies to Smash Brothers or applies to Fortnite. Yeah, so I think that we're on the same page.
Fortnite.
Good.
So Fortnite, I believe, is a little different. I haven't played Fortnite.
Okay.
But skins in Fortnite are literally just changes in color.
Mm.
Whereas from what I understand, I know Smash, they're completely different player characters.
Okay.
So Smash, there's more work because you have to, completely design them. And I'm pretty sure it's the same with what you were talking about with Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
Where, they're actually spending a decent amount of time. They're still making their money.
Right.
But they're spending a whole lot more time on making sure these characters work. And every character comes with like 6 different colors to play as. So that's 6 different skins included. You're not buying the actual colors, you're buying the character. So that's a little different. When I'm talking about skins, I'm literally talking about, that I want to dress this person up like a bunny. Or, and it's literally, you can tell it's still that person. They now have bunny ears and, the Playboy bunny outfit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different.
Sure. But getting back to the core idea, and I think you said this relatively well, it's the degree of time and effort that's put into creating that content, those skins, or that special weapon, or whatever the case may be. That, in terms of offset, in terms of the offset against how much money they can potentially make, is it's pretty dynamic, right? It's pretty striking. And I think that this is the first sort of enterprise that I can think of in gaming for sure that constitutes an approximation of money for nothing. It's not purely nothing. There is some work. There is a human coder who has to create this material, and there are rendering artists that have to design various aspects of the material. But if essentially that's just a little mental and physical sweat equity that gets put into the process, where the potential return is so much higher than the expenditure of time or energy that is needed to create the item. And one wonders how far this sort of marketplace for virtual goods can go. Because if it was in, what did Greengard say, like 30 or 13, or I think it was 30 billion back in 9 years ago, I can only imagine that it's increased incrementally since then. So you've got a lot of money being generated, not a lot of material wealth. Go ahead. Material goods. Go ahead.
Right. I equate it to a service like, I know how much, when you get a haircut, how much does it cost? I know it's different for men than it is for women.
So let's say about $12 or something.
Okay, so when I get my haircut, haircut, shampoo, style, if I wanted to add color on top, which is barely, not even talking about adding color, because that's like you're actually getting something compared to somebody who's taking away inches of your hair or whatever. It can cost me $50 to get a haircut. And you pay for that, and literally, what do you get? You get
Go ahead. Yeah.
An hour and a half of sitting in a chair. Nothing. You could cut your hair at home.
Sure, but as you suggest,
or like you go to a nail salon and you get a massage. Right. It's a service. You go get a massage at a massage parlor. You're not getting anything out of it. It's a service. It's the same thing with essentially what I like to think of as these microtransactions. They're a service. You're
Mhm.
not getting anything out of them.
Mhm.
Nothing tangible that you can hold.
Right. Unless, of course,
You're
you're referring to the virtual good within the virtual space. Then it does take on some kind of meaning.
Well, it takes on the same kind of meaning as a massage does or a haircut. It makes me feel better.
Mhm. But
It makes it
in the virtual space, it takes on more meaning, though. Yeah, because you're given at least for products certain advantages. If you have a certain weapon, or if you're able to access, as going back to your examples, a map that would give you an advantage within the game itself, then it would have strategic value within the virtual space, right?
I'd like to think a haircut has strategic value in real life.
Absolutely.
You walk in and you have shaggy hair and to job interview and you look terrible. You don't look like, I don't know, you've shaved. You probably won't be getting a job. It's an advantage. Are you going to pay for that advantage, however, is the question.
Yeah, and that is a question, I think, that's worth arguing. We have another session with Greengard. I want to talk about the social aspects. We talked kind of about the monetary aspects this time, but I want to return to this article and talk about how some of the social aspects of virtual goods are played out within the context of these games and these scenarios. So I'm just about at my time limit for a lecture for today. Madison, do you have any final thoughts before we transition into the next session?
No.
Okay. Once we're done recording today, I will stay on the Zoom chat for a few more minutes if you have any other questions related to the course. But for today, Mr. Fowler here signing off. I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a pleasant day and an even better tomorrow. Take care, folks.